Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session on how to write a method section. In the last two sessions, we had discussed on how to organize your ideas sequentially and logically when you are venturing into manuscript writing, and for that we introduced you to a tool called the argument matrix. In the second session, you got to see about how to write the background or the introduction of your manuscript. Today, we will take you through how to write the methodology section of your article. So, we introduced you already to the IMRD structure, the introduction, methods, results, and discussion. So, in the introduction, you basically explain why you started out with your research project. You are helping the reader zoom in to your topic of interest. So now you have given the reader a background. You have given the reader a background of why you started this research project, and the next section would be methods. Now this is the place where you basically elaborate what you actually did or what did you do, how did your study roll out. The next section would be the results section where you will report on what you found. And the last section would be the discussion where you will be putting all threads together and discussing what it all means. So the focus of today's session would be on methods. So by now I think you are familiar with this diagram, which is on the life cycle of an investigation. So everything starts with you identifying your data needs, or there is a research gap. It could be a question that came to you when you were there in the clinic or when you were there in the community observing something, and you decide that there is a need for evidence. There is a knowledge gap in this particular area. So you proceed to spell out a research question. We saw about the finer criteria of how to spell out a clear and well-defined research question. We then go on to formulate the study objectives. Here you specifically mention what is it that you will measure in your study. Now this will be followed by you planning out your entire study, including the data analysis. Once your analysis plan is laid out, you will be ready with your data collection instruments. Then you actually proceed to collecting data and analyzing your data. And once this is done, you will be drawing your conclusions and framing your recommendations based on your conclusions. Now, once your recommendations are ready, the actual purpose of your research plays out, which is informing the necessary stakeholders or planning out a change in policy or practice or guideline based on your research finding. Now, this again will feed into the next cycle where you identify further data needs. So, the focus of this section will be planning the analysis, preparing your data collection instruments, and how you actually collected and analyzed your data. All this comes together in your methods section. So in this session, my objectives will be that by the end of the session, you will be able to explain the importance of the methods section of an article, list the subsections of methods section of any original research article, and also you should be able to explain how your study was done and explain it in scientific yet very simple terms. So why is this method section important? So the method section is the one that adds credibility to your study, because by very clearly and very detailed specification of your methods means that you have clearly thought out how the study is going to play out, and by virtue of sharing it in your manuscript, it adds to the credibility and the confidence that you have in what your research methods have been. So a very transparently and clearly written method section adds to the credibility of your article. Let us say you come across an article where when you read the methods, nothing is clear to you. You don't know what they have measured, how they have measured. you certainly are not going to place too much trust on your results, on their results. So we will not trust the results of an article whose method section you are not able to understand or comprehend very clearly. The next reason why your methods are important are, for any researcher who reads your research article, he or she should be able to repeat the same. He or she should be able to repeat the experiment that you have conducted simply by reading your methods section alone. Further, writing a clear method section enables your reader to understand the results which you will be explaining in the next section. Also, clearly written method section helps your reader interpret the results of your study very clearly. Now, if your methods are clear, for example, if you are defining your indicator very clearly, so once you report the results, the reader is clear, okay, this is exactly what this author means when he is talking about this particular terminology. Now, there are also other implications of a good method section, which is the scope of future studies. Now, only when somebody reads your method section very clearly will he or she be able to replicate your methodology or take it further and make it one better. So, for the remaining of this session, I request you to look into this article. I have shared the link in the chat box for you to look into. This article is titled Self-Reported and Clinically Identified Loss of Smell and Taste Among Persons Tested for COVID-19 in Chennai, Southern India, July to August 2020, a cross-sectional study. In a separate session on title, we will be explaining you how to frame a title, but for now, we will be using this study to analyze how the method section of a manuscript is generally written. So, what are the proposed subheadings of a method section? We have just seen why the method section is important. Now we will see how the method section can be subdivided. Now, broadly speaking, in the method section, you talk about your study participants, you talk about the design, the research design, you talk about the materials that were used and the procedures that were followed in your study. Now, I have presented the representative subheadings which typically are used in an original research article. First, the study settings, followed by the study design, the sampling strategy, sample size, study procedures, operational definitions, data management, which includes both collection and analysis of data, and finally, human participants protection. We will go through these subheadings one by one. Before we proceed to that, one has to understand that the method section could vary from study design to study design. When your design is a systematic review or meta-analysis, or when your study design is a mixed methods design, then the alignment of these subheadings are going to be slightly different. So generally, we recommend you to stick to the journal guidelines. Different journals have different requirements for the subheadings or the division of your method section. You could follow that, and you could also adhere to standard formatting styles. I've given an example here, which is the APA style of styling and formatting your entire manuscript. So coming to the study settings. In the study settings, you basically introduce the reader to where your study has actually happened. You talk about the geographical, cultural, programmatic, and clinical or any other relevant information which is required for the reader. Now, for a quick example, you could think of an author or a reader who is living in Latin America. Now, for him to be able to understand your study which has taken place in Tirunelveli, he needs to understand this place called Tirunelveli. And let us say if you're talking about tuberculosis, he needs to understand something about tuberculosis in Tirunelveli. So that is the purpose of the section on study settings. We generally subdivide it into general settings and then specific settings. So it basically gives the reader a sense of context about the study that he is going to read further. It gives him a sense of where this study is happening. It helps the reader interpret the results correctly. It helps the reader extrapolate results correctly. Now, clinicians would agree with me, like when you frame the differential diagnosis for a given set of symptoms and signs, it could be very different in different parts of our country itself. Similarly, for readers across the globe to make sense of your study results, you introduce them to your study settings. So if you can look into the article that I've shared with you, here we have introduced the reader to the study setting, which is in Chennai. So we have given them a quick background of where Chennai is, whether it is a city or a village, is it an urban setting, and whom are we talking about. So in this study, we are talking about persons who came for COVID-19 testing, okay. So if you see in the study settings, we've written what is the general testing and reporting framework that we follow in Chennai as in India. So we have given the reader a sense of context about the place where the study is taking place, about the disease, the testing and the reporting for that disease which happens in this geographical setting. So if you come to study design, which is the next section, here you need to keep the terminology appropriate. Very often we are tempted to use terminology interchangeably. So please specify what your study design is very clearly first, and then use consistent terminology all through your study. For example, I have listed some of the common errors that people make when they give a name to the study design that they have followed. Because once you specify this, the reader has a certain expectations of what to expect in the results. For example, if you're going to tell me that you have conducted a cohort study, then I'm going to be looking for incidence measures and incidence rate ratios in your results. If you are going to tell me that you have conducted a case control study, then I am going to be looking for odds ratios and adjusted odds ratios in your results. So these are some common errors that people make in terminology. You need to justify the need for mixed methods design if you have used a mixed methods design. It should not suddenly crop up in the study design that you say that I have used a mixed methods design. You need to justify the need for a mixed methods design to answer your research question. So if I may draw your attention here, in this study, we have clearly spelled out that we have conducted an analytical cross-sectional study. The next section will be on operational definitions. By operational definitions, we mean what a given term means in the context of your study. Now, the moment I say below poverty line, there could be different ways poverty line is defined across the globe or across the nation even. Whether I'm referring to an international definition, whether I'm referring to a definition that is very specifically used in India, or have I framed my own definition for the sake of my study. So here we recommend that you refer to standard sources and use standard definitions. And if you have framed an operational definition for the sake of your study, we recommend that you state it very explicitly. Please state it explicitly so that the reader understands it clearly. So here if you say below poverty line and you define it very clearly, as in this study we've said, we've taken a convenient way of defining poverty line in this study as a monthly household income of less than INR 6,000. So now the reader knows what I mean later in the results when I say people who lived below poverty line constituted 20% of my study sample. So this sets the foundation for it. The other reason why you need to state your operational definitions clearly is that it enables comparison with existing literature. The moment I have defined this, you know whether or not you can compare my proportion of BPL patients in my study with another study. You needn't be alarmed if I say 20% and another study says 5% people live below the poverty line. You need to look at the operational definitions that were used in both the studies to know the reason for this disparity in the estimates. The next section of methods would be on sampling strategy and sample size. We did talk about study population and sample in the last sessions. So just because you couldn't study an entire population, you have sampled, you have taken a representative sample and conducted your study. Now, how did you select that representative sample? That is what you discuss under sampling strategy. Now, once the sampling strategy is defined, that plays a role in the sample size calculation. There are many parameters that go into the sample size calculation, including your study design itself, including the type of sampling that you have decided to use, and the parameters that you are trying to estimate, and the other different errors and precisions that you weave into your sample size calculation. Now, why is this important? Is it necessary to go into much detail? We always recommend that you do so. One, when you write it very clearly, you are less likely to get unnecessary questions from the reviewers, from the journal to which you are submitting your article. The other, it is just a good reporting practice. For example, in response to this article, we had received an email from a junior resident in some hospital requesting details of the sample size calculation that we had used. He even wanted the numbers that we had imputed. So we had reported everything clearly in the manuscript itself, and it helps the reader, it helps the person who reads this section be clear how you came with a magic number of this particular number as the sample size for your study. So here if you see, we have taken a number 25% for the COVID positive patients who are likely to suffer from loss of smell and taste, and then we have taken 5% as the prevalence of anosmia or ageusia in COVID negative patients. We have specified the errors that are allowable when we are comparing these two groups, and we have specified how we are going to be sampling people. So all this comes together in your sampling strategy and sample size section. Now, when all this is done, you come to the study procedures. Now, this is where you describe in much detail about how exactly the study rolled out. You describe every step along the way in lots of detail. Okay, so in this section, you can refer people to any standardized procedures that you have used, or any manuals that you have referred to, or any particular application or equipment or tool that you have used in your particular study. So if you see here in this study, we have referred to the De Jong's neurological examination textbook to describe or to standardize the methods that we used for the measurement of loss of smell and loss of taste among our study participants. So we have given a reference to the particular textbook. Similarly, if you are using a state-of-the-art new equipment, then you may want to give a reference to that particular manual from where you have taken the standard operating procedures for that equipment. Beyond this, what you do in study procedures is you exactly describe what you did in your study, how you started out, how you selected the patients, how you collected data from them, how the data was collected, and every step. Some of us prefer to use algorithms or summaries or flow charts to describe a more complicated study design. Now, if it is a very straightforward study design, say you interviewed 100 people, you gave them paper forms, you collected the data, you entered it, and all the 100 had responded. So now this looks very simple, but there are other more complicated study designs which have a few more steps, and if you find it cumbersome to explain it in text, or if you think a flowchart does more justice to explain how the study played out, then you could use that also. You could use a flowchart to show how your study proceeded. Now coming to data management, like I already said, this includes both the data collection and the data analysis. Now here we have explained how the data was collected. We have said that we used a face-to-face data collection mechanism, and how we collected the samples, or how we tested, or how we did the clinical examination of people for loss of smell and loss of taste. So under this section, you basically list all the tools and techniques that you used for data collection. It could be paper forms, it could be specific scales, like psychiatrists could be using different scales for measuring maybe anxiety, maybe depression. So you list out the names of all tools and techniques that you used here. Then you come to data entry. Now this is important because people need to understand where your data came from and how it was entered. If you are extracting data from case sheets, then you have to clearly specify who extracted the data and where it was entered into and how it was entered. The next step would be data validation. Now these are certain checks and these are certain checks that we use to ensure that the data that goes into analysis is of very good quality, and there is absolutely no compromise on the quality of data, because garbage in and garbage out. You give very poor quality data, you give erroneous data, then the best that could happen is you come with useless results, and the worst that can happen is you can end up harming people's lives by reporting wrong results. So we emphasize on data entry and validation to ensure that the data is of good quality. So it is essential that you clearly specify what efforts you had taken to ensure data quality. Did you have 2 people entering the data, or did you have supervisors who checked a certain proportion of data collected from the study participants, or did you have something in your data collection tool itself which did not allow the entry of erroneous data? For example, some of us use electronic data collection tools, an application perhaps. You could have the app prompt the data entry operator when he or she makes an erroneous entry. So this is the place where you specify all these details. The next section, and I'm sure this section gives a lot of jitters to many people, data analysis. So here again, you report all the analysis that you performed in a sequential way. Like we mentioned in the previous sections, go from general to specific, go from simple to more complex. Or simply said, state the truth, state of what you did. You got the data, you cleaned the data, you ran descriptive statistics, you performed analytical statistics, and you calculated certain measures. So go in the logical flow in which it is done. Please report the summary measures or the descriptive statistics. Then you report the measures of association, the analytical statistics, maybe your relative risk, maybe your odds ratio, whatever is that measure of association that you calculated. Then you report the statistical tests that you employed in your study to compare the different groups in your study. You could be reporting p-values, or you could be reporting confidence interval. Please state them explicitly. You also mention the software that you used for data entry and for data analysis. So here we say we used EpiInfo version 7.2 for analysis. Now this again is something that is very important, because there are some journals which request you to share the analysis codes. Now this is something that will be covered in a later session also. So if you are specifying a particular software that you have used for analysis, and if the journal requires the codes, the analysis codes, the program that you use to analyze the data, then you have to be ready to share it. So it is very good to state it here itself. So this is just a summary slide where I say how you go objective wise. Like for objective 1, this is the study design I employed. These are the participants who were included to meet this objective. This is the indicator I calculated to meet this objective. This is the data collection this is the data collection method that I used to calculate this indicator, and this was the data collection tool I used. So it is a very good practice to try to list all your objectives, and against the objectives you could say the study design, the participants, the indicator that is calculated, the data collection method, and the data collection tool. So for example, I have written the first objective in this study that we're discussing was to measure prevalence of self-reported loss of smell among all adults reporting for COVID-19 testing in a testing center. So the design we've already discussed, we've used a cross-sectional study design here, and the indicator I'm reporting. So if you read in my objective section that I am going to be measuring the prevalence of self-reported loss of smell among people reporting for COVID testing, then you are going to be expecting that I will calculate the proportion of COVID tested participants with anosmia. Okay, so this would be the indicator. Now to calculate this indicator, I need two numbers. I need the total number of people who were tested for COVID, and among them, the number who had anosmia. So for this, what am I going to do? Because this is self-reported loss of smell, I'm going to use interview as my data collection method. And if you recollect, we just read that we did face-to-face interviews. And what was the tool I used? I used a questionnaire, a structured questionnaire perhaps, to get this information. So this table does not make it to your manuscript, but this table helps you organize very clearly what methods were employed to meet what objectives. And this is the very principle of the argument matrix that we discussed earlier, where each section is logically linked to the subsequent and the previous section, if any. Now the last section of your methods would be human participants protection. Now this is the place where you detail what measures were taken in your study to protect the study subjects. So generally the requirements are you mention the name of the ethics committee or the IHEC board, the Institutional Human Ethics Committee board, or if you are dealing with animals, then that is a different ethics committee that looks at it. You need to specify the name and the number. Some of them require a reference number of the letter or the clearance letter, and the specific measures that were taken to protect human participants in your study, whether it was informed written consent or how measures were taken to protect confidentiality of the information that is collected, how you ensured privacy of the participants, and how you ensured that no specific danger or additional danger was posed by your study to the participant. It is also here that you mention if there were any deviations from protocol of your study. Now let us say you had planned an RCT and you had submitted a protocol and the ethics committee had cleared it, but some new literature comes and you had made some deviations from the protocol. Now this needs to go through the ethics committee again. So if this has happened, then you report this in the method section. You need to report these deviations clearly in the method section. Remember, a very detailed method section is very helpful to another researcher who's going to follow your footsteps but only wants to get further ahead of you. So quickly we will see the do's and don'ts for the method section. So if you are beginning to write your manuscript and you already have the protocol of your study ready, then you could edit your protocol and turn the tense of the method section from the future tense to the past tense, because now your study is done and you are writing everything in past tense. Structure the section. You could use the subheadings that we just discussed. Describe what was done very clearly in very simple terms. You needn't get confused at all. Just chronologically narrate as if you would tell a fellow researcher what you actually did. Quote only key references that you have used. For example, a sampling methodology paper could be a reference. Some of you are analyzing secondary data from other data sets that are already available. Then you don't have to describe the sampling methodology of that large survey that happened. You could give a reference to that sampling methodology paper. The don'ts: do not use passive voice. Always take ownership for what you've done and say, we did this, we collected the samples. So write it in active voice as in first person. Do not provide results in the methods section. This could be a little difficult with qualitative papers where the line between methods, results and discussion is sometimes marred, but in quantitative the distinction is crystal clear. So please stick to reporting only methods in the methods section. Do not provide excessive details on information collected. Like some go into too much detail of listing all the variables. We collected detail on the age, sex, BMI. Now you don't have to list all the variables that you collected data on. Just report what is necessary. Explain rather than label. So like I said, use scientific language but use very simple language. Explain what you did. So here we have given the example. We selected persons among visitors of the local market, the local shop and the healthcare facilities. Now this tells the reader what you actually did. So you have explained. Labeling it would be simply saying we took a convenient sample of the population, which gives you no detail at all. So try to explain rather than simply use label. Now once you've written the method section, or let us say you're reading the method section of another article, this is a checklist that you could use. You could see whether the methods are matched to the objectives, whether the methods to measure or to answer each of the objectives have been described. Were the parameters recorded and analyzed correctly? Now let us say they are measuring the blood pressure of a person. You need to know what was the equipment they used, how did they standardize the equipment, how many measurements were taken, how were they spaced, what pre-requirements were given to the patient, and whether how both the raters had matched their methods to measure the blood pressure. So you need to know how the particular parameter was recorded and later whether it was analyzed correctly. Would a reader be able to repeat the same experiment? Now once you read your own method section, when you've written it, you have to put yourself in a third person's place, or a good habit would be to give it to a peer researcher and ask him to comment, by reading my method section, would you be able to replicate this experiment? I'll leave you with these take-home messages. Describe your methods used to meet each of your objectives sequentially. So I've read objective 1, 2, 3. So when I come to your method section, I should be able to see the method to answer objective 1, 2 and 3 sequentially. Describe your participants, design, methods, tools and analysis employed. Describe each of them in complete detail. Organize the methods under the suggested subheadings. Be scientific. You need to be scientific but avoid jargons, as in loaded terms and labeling things instead of explaining them. And always remember that your method section reflects on the credibility and reliability of the results that you have generated.